Hello everyone, this is going to be the first out of a two-part series on Metro Last Light. As well 2033, I will upload a full version of the video once I upload the second part as well. Either way, enjoy. In a recent video I talked about one of my favorite things about writing, that it forces you to pay attention to the games you play and invites you to think about them long after you've put your third mouse through the wall for that day. But playing Metro Last Light also illuminated me to something I despise about writing. It's fucking hard. It's so hard in fact that sometimes it will take me 3 or 4 hours to write a couple of pages worth of script. And yet, unlike much of the internet these days, I've never used AI in the process of writing. I don't need such blasphemous technology to make my videos worse. I'm already great at that. Writing about games, however, is almost a fool's errand these days. Writing about games that have let you down borders on masochism. But writing about games that have been let down is something else. When I uploaded my full Metro 2033 retrospective, I also posted a review on the Metro subreddit with a question. Where does the first game rank in the trilogy? My ranking was clear from the get-go, firmly at the bottom. Now, I deleted that post out of sheer shame of that opinion, but when I started replaying Last Light for this video, I was confident that my mind would not change. This isn't the first time I've played any of these games after all, and after consuming enough of something, you subconsciously create a spot for it in the hierarchy of games you've played before. After a few years, that position crystallizes, and if you don't re-examine it from time to time, it could make you believe all sorts of crazy things, like that 2014 was the peak of internet content or that Fallout 4 is good. I even ended that video with a positive note, anticipating that I would only have good things to say about the sequel, but getting chewed up and spit out by it yet again, I'm not so sure anymore. Metro Last Light is a clear improvement over some of the weakest points of the last game, but much like the victims of the Dark Ones, the developers seem to have forgotten about what made the strongest parts of 2033 work. But for now I'm getting too ahead of myself. Maestro, please roll the film. Metro 2033, or at least the canon version of it, is a tale of sunk cost. As Artyom gets closer and closer to his objective, he feels the burden on himself growing heavier and heavier. He starts off being entrusted with a vitally important mission by one of his heroes, and the start of his adventure is predicated on a lie. His resistance to the Dark Ones and later hero shenanigans get Bourbon killed. And then, he causes a ranger to die escorting him to Polis. After that, kills a few tens of people and turns hordes of good boys into minced meat. Not to mention putting his life and V-card on the line. All of this could not have been for nothing. I am the savior of the Metro, and I will not allow these liptards to fill my brain with bullshit like peace and understanding. Eventually, whether Artyom understands it or not, he sacrifices the Dark Ones to make up for his own failures. He cannot comprehend his mission to have had a meaning any other way. A year on, Artyom's brain is still coping. He has nightmares about the Dark Ones, tricking him into killing his own friends, almost as if to make himself believe that what he did was a good thing. He is woken up by Khan, yes, the same Khan as the previous game, informing him that he has found a lone Dark One in Ground Zero. After getting up, it becomes clear that Artyom never returned to his home station in Vadank, but is instead living in D6, the same bunker they activated and launched a nuclear attack from in the previous game. Thankfully, they cleaned it a bit. D6 is now the man cave of the Rangers, the irony being that it's much cleaner than the literal rat hole Artyom grew up in for most of his life. Here, they found enough food to eradicate poverty in the entire Metro, allegedly. As we speak, they are in the process of equitably distributing it, by which I mean everybody's getting ready for war. Again.
Thank you.
Khan is convinced he must allow Artyom to make contact with a Dark One survivor, and for some reason thought it was a good idea to take permission from the leader of the Rangers, who, if you're not familiar, was literally a few steps away from doing the honors himself. Surprisingly though, Miller welcomes Khan's plan and agrees that they should indeed make contact with the Dark Ones, through the sights of a sniper rifle. He sends Anna, his daughter and the best sniper of the Rangers, to aid Artyom in his goal. Immediately you should notice quite a few similarities between 2033 and Last Last Light. Both of them start with Artyom in his room and someone waking him up, later to be given a mission by a ranger that entails the big G word that YouTube doesn't want me to say. Welcome in Obama's America, everyone. The similarities continue when you meet a guy whom you have a personal interest in helping, who teaches you about the principles of stealth and collective ownership of the means of production. You explore the outside with that person and barely make it back into the metro. Then he gets captured and then you have to save him. At some point you manage a loud escape from an enemy station. You find the rail car that eventually crashes, all while stopping along the way to recharge your battery, and even the guns are pretty much untouched. And the same goes for the attachments and the enemies. You still have your good boys and the cops, the demons, the tentacles, the spiders, as well as a new enemy type, the shrimp. Not to mention here the boss enemies, which I can't fucking wait to get to. So on a superficial level you might think that we are dealing with a Doom 1, Doom 2 situation here, where the second game is mostly an extension of the first one and designed with the same philosophy in mind. But that's mistaken. The differences here are quantitative more than qualitative, and those can prove to be just as transformative. Let's take a look at ammo, for example. It has been a staple of the series, both because of the fact that certain ammo types are a type of currency in the game, and also because Metro 2033 was a balls-to-the-wall scavenging simulator, at least in the harder difficulties. As I said in my video about that game, the combination of a lack of on-screen prompts for ammo pickups and the scarcity of it forced the player to be absolutely horrified of their environment, while making them look at every nook and cranny, defile every corpse in the search of that tasty weapon pickup sound. This played into the tension of every encounter, as you'd usually not have enough ammo to risk a large gunfight with every group you saw. However, towards the end, this delicate balance of ammo left running and screaming as it was replaced with a linear shooting gallery, with plentiful ammo, ridiculous guns, and never-ending health. I don't mind a good climactic fight every once in a while, but if the last quarter or even third of your survival game is indistinguishable from an overpowered Fallout character, then you have yourself a problem. I already talked about this at length, but what I want you to understand is that Metro 2033 is far from executing its main attraction properly. And with that context, let's see how the sequel handles ammo. Like this.
My body is a machine that turns spamming E into murder toys.
I'm sorry, but who the fuck made the decision to have these desolate tunnels have more bullets than the average bedroom of a Slavic grandpa? Even in those rare cases when Artyom isn't practically crumbling from the weight of ammo he has, you can use your military-grade bullets to top up any kind of ammo you want. Currency is so common in fact that at some point I was routinely dropping fully modded weapons because I knew I could buy the same setup at the next station for what was practically nothing to me. I remember when night vision was a luxury in the first game, but here, your entire game will be played through a green filter. Thanks for the vegan propaganda, THQ. I will enjoy mowing down unsuspecting wildlife with my fully automatic laser sight extended mag shotgun. And by the way, the same goes for all other attachments, including silencers. I already made the point that in the first game there is not much use to pneumatic weapons once you find the silenced firearm, but this game gives it to you as soon as you finish the tutorial, making the pneumatic weapons even more useless than before. To illustrate just how bad the ammo problem is in this game, you have to understand a certain mechanic. If you press R for more than roughly an attosecond with an assault rifle, the game will reload your gun with military-grade ammo instead, which is more powerful but also more rare. A lot of times you won't even notice you're pissing your money away until your enemies start catching on fire or you put up your inventory screen to check. So even with this completely broken mechanic that would constantly reload unwanted ammo in my gun, I still wasn't running out of that shit. You don't understand, okay? Halfway through the game my takedown button broke, so I had to shoot and get into gunfights far more than I would have liked to. And my ammo still wasn't running out. Yeah, the ultimate challenge. You fucking wish, bucko. The only ultimate challenge the ranger gives you is challenging your doctor to fix your carpal tunnel from pressing E in vain 90% of the game. The lack of a HUD makes it almost impossible to see if there's anything to loot in a certain place. The problem doesn't end with looting. There is a part where you have to turn on a rail car to get it going, and the game just expects you to guess that you have to press, I shit you not, the jump button to get it started. Why? I can excuse this kind of shit from the first game, but this feels like making the same exact mistake twice. and the addition of so many quick-time events makes it much harder to recommend the Ranger Hardcore mode. If you've played the game before, you can still learn where the QTE is and the cutscenes are, but I almost don't even want you to dignify such a lazy implementation of a quote-unquote realistic mode. However, as harsh as I may have come across, all of this is relatively benign. I cannot say that I hated this game despite the abundance of ammo, and the poorly implemented immersive mode is not something a game ever died because of. However, what I'm interested in exploring is why this game has so much ammo. What is it constantly trying to prepare you for? In the first game, mandatory combat arenas or set pieces were relatively common, but in a lot of cases you had allies with you. And I don't mean Call of Duty allies with cotton bullets. These are Russian allies, my friend. Wait, is that my impression of a Russian accent? The game even makes a point of this. In a certain level, Khan expressly tells you to lure the Nosalises towards the defensive lines if you get overwhelmed. In other cases, you are accompanied by a fellow station dweller, a ranger, or sometimes you are using a bandana glitch, and never needing to worry about ammo. The reason the game does this is because it understands that the player might not always have enough ammo to deal with whole swarms of enemies by themselves, and gives you a hand from time to time. It even happened once that I ran out of ammo before Hull Station in the first game, and I had to juggle the Nosalises around to wait for my comrades to finish them off. It's a good idea that doesn't make the player feel completely untouchable, but at the same time gives them a bit of leeway, without which they might need to resort to exploits or even get soft-locked into a room they have no hope of clearing. In the sequel, the number of arenas is significantly increased, and the number of combat-ready companions significantly decreased. So in that case, they pretty much need to give the player more ammo. And since they have to account for the players who are not very good at aiming, i.e. the ones who are playing on a controller, that means that there is no wonder why scarcity is so foreign to this game. In a spot around the halfway point, you are attacked by a large group of Nosalises, and by that I mean larger than almost every other group you've fought so far. And by the way, here I suggest you crouch in a corner and spam molotovs. The enemies will just mostly get stun locked by the fire and die on their own. Little episodes like this happen throughout the entire game, with Nosalises or with shrimp, which on the one hand need to be attacked at the weak spot to be significantly harmed, but also have a ton of health. Even in cases where you are seemingly given the option of sneaking around, the game seems like it's trying to push you towards just shooting everyone, and not in a fair way. A while after this part you can approach a bridge that overlooks a room full of enemies. So maybe they are giving you the option of sneaking past them, right? Wrong. And once you make it to the halfway point, it breaks down and puts you right in the middle of a room full of enemies. I already took them out before going down there because I already got burned by this trap once. But you are very likely to lose a lot of your progress if you trust the game to provide multiple paths for this part. This is in complete contrast to earlier in the game, where the level design is so intricate and the paths to take are so many that you can easily go through whole rooms without firing a shot if you choose to and if you are careful. The game quickly goes from something approaching an immersive sim like Dishonored to an immersive shit like Black Ops 5,000,080,000. Now, I have a confession to make. I made the previous parts as long and verbose as I could, because there is one part of the game that I really don't like to talk about, but I still have to. That part are the bosses. And boy, do I fucking hate the bosses. The first game doesn't really have these. Instead, it has enemies which you don't really want to fight unless you are insane. The demons and the librarians would, in a worse game, be utilized as occasional mini-bosses that you would have to deal with, maybe accompanied by smaller enemies to make your life worse. Here, however, both of them are completely optional fights. You can evade the demons by summoning your inner gamer and hiding from the sun, and the librarians by taking flicks of them. Yes bro, we see the fit, now leave me alone. Metro Last Light introduced the concept of proper bosses, the only thing missing from which is a Dark Souls health bar and a skip button. The first boss you'll come across is in a swamp level, and he's teased when you go inside his former plane to pick up some fuel. He's basically the same exact enemy that you fought before, but bigger and much tougher, which is a theme with these boss fights 2/3 of the time. Another theme is that you are given a few chances to fight it before the real battle at the end of the level, which is a strange decision, considering that this is not a complex enemy by any stretch of the imagination. I don't need practice to learn the attack pattern of left jab, right jab, okay? Another characteristic of this boss fight, which will prove to be a theme for the rest of them, is the fact that it suffers from Dark Souls 2-itis, in the sense that the boss itself would quickly become boring or easy to fight. So the designers just put in a bunch of fodder other enemies, which you can fully evade if you have your teammates shoot them. So these accompanying enemies don't even achieve their not so noble goal, and the boss becomes a boring run, turn around, shoot, throw a couple of molotovs or mines for good measure, and then win. The next boss comes around 40 minutes of gameplay after this one, and the reason why I speculate that is because the developers thought that we'd like the first one so much that we couldn't even wait for the second one. This is the Nosalis Rhino, also known as the Big Mummy, but not the kind I'd like to crush me with her feet. It's instead the type that crushes you with her head, or tries to do so very occasionally, and mostly has a beef with the environment. This boss is teased right after you finish the previous one. The moment I heard it, I was like, oh boy, I cannot wait for another one. The strategy here is very similar to the previous one. You bait and occasionally shoot the surrounding fodder, except in this case you can easily kill the boss in a single shotgun blast after you've gotten her to destroy the entire arena. Now at the very least you're given an introduction to this boss before the final fight, so you're not completely in the dark how to beat it. It's not particularly mechanically interesting, and it just boils down to running around and baiting the boss into attacking the environment. The third boss, and might I say the best one, is introduced like this. Oh, look at those bears, so cute! Oh shit! This boss takes place way after the first two, after you save the Dark One, and this is the first boss where you're given a Doom-style resupply before you enter the arena, and that's for a good reason. If you haven't saved up any mines or other explosives, you are in for a bad time. The Watchmen that in the previous bosses would play the role of fodder actually help you in this one, by attacking the mama bear once you do enough damage to her and leaving her exposed for you to attack her back. All of which is facilitated with the Dark One giving Artyom small bursts of the Speed Force and Predator Vision at the same time. After you do this a few times, the bear retreats to the woods where Artyom finds her and is given a chance to either leave her to be eaten by the Watchmen and allow her pups to suffer the same fate, or shoot the Watchmen and give her an opportunity to escape. This boss isn't more mechanically impressive than the previous two, but story-wise there is a big difference. Artyom is by that point traveling with the last living child of the race he genocided, and said child is constantly watching every move of Artyom to determine if he is traveling with someone who should be allowed to be crushed by D6 at the end. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, they are starting to care about the animals now. The Dark Ones have gone woke. If it were up to me, I would have removed the two other bosses completely and only left this one in the game. Its themes more than make up for its lacking mechanics, and I'm frankly not fond of more than one fight of this kind. The Metro games don't need any boss fights to create climactic moments. The first one did it with a child on Artyom's back, for God's sake, being impressed at the sight of the sky, or with a thematically rich encounter against terrifying enemies. That being said, the sequels don't need to follow what was laid out by the first game. Bosses can be a powerful storytelling tool, but when you force a few of them at once with not enough to distinguish them from one another, nor any connection to the broader story, it can feel like maybe not a lot of thought was put into them. Now that we talked about something of which there is too much, let's turn our sights towards something there is way too little of. Another example of this game seemingly trying to appeal to a wider audience is the horror. What horror? Metro 2033's horror elements as well as atmosphere are probably the things that players remember most fondly about it, which is evidenced by the fact that most of the replies in my aforementioned deleted Reddit post were mentioning how the second game's horror was absent and less intense than the first one. This is also an aspect that puzzled me before replaying this game, because once again I remembered Metro Last Light as being far scarier. So what happened? What happened, as it turns out, is that I eventually got used to these games, and replaying 2033 recently, I was much more ready to face what it had to throw at me. From the general sound design to the library, I had gone through it a few times before, so of course I wasn't quite as afraid. On the other hand, Last Light was the first of the trilogy I ever played, and as a result, all of these aspects of psychological horror took me completely by surprise. I had signed up to play what seemed like your average shooter, but was absolutely shocked to see what it had in store for me. This, I think, explains why I've always thought Last Light was scarier. Now, after coming back to it for this video, I had killed hundreds more spiders and Nosalises, so I was much more comfortable being in a room full of them than in a room full of... Whatever bad things that you can say about Last Light's horror is absolutely destroyed right here, in a tunnel you're supposed to pass using this gamer railcar. Nice cloth physics, by the way. In one of the optional offshoots of this tunnel, you find the most bone-chilling scene in any of the games. The introduction to the shadows in 2033 didn't have anywhere near this effect, because you were passing through a ghost tunnel with Khan, who was doing his best to explain to you what you were seeing down there. It was still scary down there, don't get me wrong. Despite the fact that there was someone else with you, it was someone that you had just started traveling with, and was saying a lot of funny words in the meantime. However, the abruptness of going from the lights of your trusty railcar to this absolute horror show terrified me every single time. The shadows in here differ to the ones in 2033, in that they only appear where there is no light, at the very edges of your field of vision. Combined with the horrifying sounds in the background, and you have right here one of the most oppressive, dark, and memorable scenes in the entirety of the series. Sniper rifle, fuck that, I'm getting out of here. There is one problem with this part, it's fucking optional. You have to deliberately get out of your railcar to find it, and it's hidden behind a bigger one, so it's no wonder people think the horror of Last Light fell off. The single best horror sequence in the series, and it's hidden in a small insignificant room that only half of the people probably will even find. Whatever horror exists in the main game is much less subtle, and a complete no-no for people who are trypophobic. Otherwise, what you see isn't necessarily that scary, but the concept of these hands being the ones of people whose souls have been left behind and can't interact with the real world except by kidnapping people from it to have some company is just as scary. However, a secluded room in a tunnel and a sequence lasting like 10 seconds is, in my opinion, not enough. I believe to make the horror of this game feel as effortful. What's in here is incredible, but that's exactly what perplexes me the most. Why didn't they make this game scarier? They obviously could. Now I might have an explanation for this, as well as to why the encounter design and supply distribution are so different compared to the first one. Metro Last Light marks the point in which the series went mainstream, at least in sales numbers, topping 2033's lifetime sales after its first week. I think the mission design has a lot to do with that, and if you are a shooter coming out of 2013, trying to make it as big as possible, there is a very clear template you can follow. That means more gunfights, more enemies, more explosions, and as a result more ammo and bigger guns. To illustrate my point, I'd like to show you an interview with Hugh Bannon of THQ, who was the global brand manager for Metro Last Light.
And then you have Hansa, which is, I guess, the closest to a more egalitarian capitalist regime.
What the fuck? If you don't know what a global brand manager is, by the way, he's the guy in charge of communicating, branding, and marketing the game, also known as line.
I have to go back for her insult. She'll die without it. You'll buy some here. I can't let you go. How can we buy anything when all we had is back there? And Hansa charges so much.
Egalitarianism, everyone. He's also the guy you'll see in 9 out of 10 thumbnails if you look up Metro Last Light interview. Though you'd be forgiven for thinking he's an actual developer, since he also shows up in videos explicitly titled Developer Interviews, and talks in first person when describing the development process.
Altogether, we're just going to make a few tweaks and revisions, and hopefully it'll be a lot more satisfying to use, but it's definitely something that we want to keep in the game.
But talks in third person when referring to 4A Games, the actual developers. So when he says things like,
we're going to tell another twisting, turning story, which...
It almost reads to me like he's implicitly admitting that THQ put its paws a bit too far deep inside Last Light's development process. And we all know that when that happens, which frankly is in most if not all cases, then something from the creativity of the studio is inevitably lost. In this case, this is felt through a seismic shift, a shift which seems to make the game more palatable to mainstream shooter enjoyers. Now, of course, I can never really know if THQ is to blame for these new design decisions, or if some passing statements by the brand director mean anything substantial, but the studio itself already almost got this part right. They know how to make a game with scarcity, and they know how to make climactic fights without the tropes of modern games. So all of these had to have been decisions either forced down upon them to make more money, or decisions they made themselves, and somehow I don't think it's the latter. Now I know I may have talked a bit too much about the negatives of these games, so I have to balance it out a bit. Otherwise I might not sound like the unbiased, fence-sitting game critic I want to pretend to be. And thankfully this game makes my job very easy in that regard. The level design of Metro Last Light is, as far as I'm concerned, a clear step forward when it wants to be. I already talked about all the complex sneaking sections with diverging paths and so forth, but that's not all. Last Light underwent a clear overhaul in terms of level complexity, and to illustrate that, let's take the beginning of the swamp level, which comes before the big shrimp boss I already talked about. You are given the task of finding some leftover fuel from either the gas station or the abandoned plane to get this automatic bridge thing going. At first glance, this appears not too different from any other level of the outside in Metro 2033, but here's the kicker. The swamp level has an imperial, or better yet, a metric fuckton of secret areas to explore. You have the abandoned car park, which has a secret base with a sniper rifle, if you want to use that for some reason, and further beyond that, another secret stash that I had never come across before this playthrough. Later on, there is a big house that draws your attention as you approach it with the aforementioned transport, and a whole lot of nooks and crannies peppered throughout. In comparison, the levels of 2033 were relatively linear, and when they did have offshoots, they were often just small rooms or basements. Here there is even a whole level that I'd argue is completely made up of offshoots. None of the levels feel underutilized or have their potential squandered, which is not something I can always say about 2033. Every time you find a new path, you always wonder what you'll find this time, and most of the time it's something really useful. There are even conversations you can listen in on between enemy guards that indirectly clue you into where you can find some hidden goodies, without feeling too much like exposition. This lends to my comparison to an immersive sim even further. This shit is definitely right out of Dishonored, except you have to actually listen to a one-off piece of dialogue without the failsafe of a quest marker telling you where to go. And when you get there, the goodies are always placed somewhere that feels like the owner didn't want anyone getting there, while at the same time showing you that the level design has more dimensions than just sneaking next to a wall. I love it. My only gripe is that the game doesn't use this more, but instead chooses to have more of these find the red key, look around the level for the appropriate safe, and then open it. These activities don't feel nearly as satisfying to solve. A lot of times require you to have cleaned out the entire level first. And speaking of level design, there is no way I can ever forget about the stations, because holy shit, the step up in station design is incredible. You start off at D6, which is absolutely bustling with activities and dialogue. It's full of NPCs, and a lot of them are having conversations, which at times even overlap with one another, because why wouldn't they? It's not like they're talking for you, the player character, to specifically hear them, right? The first station in Metro 2033 had a few seeds of this general design philosophy, but the NPC count was much lower and many of the interactions you had to start manually, and even then people didn't really have anything interesting to say. This is something that probably wasn't possible with the technology of the first game, and I really appreciate that they gave so much life to these stations. And that's not only thanks to the sheer NPC count. In the first game you can barely tell most of the stations apart, so much so that during the process of editing that video I often confused the market for Riga, because they look and feel so damn similar. Last Light makes sure you'll never have a problem like that again. One station here has a fishing economy and is called Venice, sponsored by Jeff Bezos, that sustain themselves on eating fish and shrimp. On the way here you even see a whole habitat for shrimp, and this is before you've ever encountered them as enemies. Too bad they're all dead now. Oops! There's a grumpy old guy here and a little kid who's lost his teddy bear, that you can win in a shooting contest. Another station, Bolshoi, is even more memorable. It was built under the theater of the same name and is full of the artists who were able to evacuate in time. You can even sit through a whole performance with a dog trainer, a guitarist, dancers, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. At some point the presenter talks about the hero of exhibition destroying the Dark Ones using a mushroom. This isn't just a reference to Artyom, who blew up the Dark Ones in the first game, but if you know the lore, you know that a significant portion of the exhibition's economy comes from mushroom tea. This sentence alone is absolutely immaculate. I love it. At some point you even go to a GTA-style strip club, and we'll eventually talk about how this game portrays women. Don't you fucking worry. There is even a guy at the entrance who is an obvious caricature of the critic LARPers, pretending to stand up for real art instead of the modern so-called decadence, while all they do themselves is cry and moan. Wait a minute, is this making fun of me? However, the bright lights and light-hearted fun shouldn't deceive you, because if you stop and listen in, you'll still hear or see the scars, the terrors of the Metro live in people, and the kind of things that they have to go through to survive. Yet somehow they are still able to maintain seemingly unnecessary activities like sitting down and watching a watchman jump to and fro a stool. It's eerily beautiful how even in what should be the most depressing existence imaginable, people are still somehow able to carry on such activities and not allow neither art nor the memory of the old world die. In a superficial sense, this is just a different station to look at, but on a bit of a deeper level it personifies hope itself. The fact that what makes us human is still alive and burning, and the dream that one day the sun will see these expressions of humanity once again. But to be able to even hope for that, we need to kill the last of the Dark Ones.